Hello everyone. In this video we are going to talk about adjustments. Now there are two types of adjustments that you can do, destructive and non-destructive. So first we're going to talk about the destructive adjustments. So if you go to image, you'll see adjustments here. These are the different types of adjustments that you can do, and you can do almost all of them either destructively or non-destructively. So you've got things like brightness and contrast. So I can change the brightness or the contrast and move around, click OK, but it's permanently destroys this image. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that. Go back up, image, adjustments. I can do things like hue and saturation. Change the hue or the saturation of the entire picture. I can colorize the picture, change that. And again, it's destroying that layer. If I go back to adjustments and go back to hue and saturation, everything is set back to 0. So now if I try to get the colors back, you can see I'm already on colorize. I can't get my colors back here. So once I've done an adjustment like this, I can't do anything else to fix it. Fortunately, I have not saved it, so I can do Control Z until I get it back. Or I could do File Revert to get it back, but once I've saved it and closed it, if I try to open it back up, there's nothing I can do to one of those adjustments. Now, I can make the adjustment only on part of the image. So for instance, if I selected this flower and then inverted my selection and went back up to image adjustments and did, let's say, black and white, and there's all kinds of different settings I can do here for black and white, but I'm just going to leave it at the default and say OK. So you can see I've added that black and white adjustment only to the background and not to the flower. But again, it is destructive and there's nothing I can do to change that once I've done it and closed it, other than to undo. So I'm going to undo it, and let's talk about non-destructive. So let me deselect, Control D to deselect. So there's two ways to do adjustments that are non-destructive. They're basically exactly the same thing. There's just two ways of getting to it. So this is the adjustments panel, and here you have the same thing. There's that brightness contrast, there's that hue and saturation, there's that black and white, you've got photo filters, and you can see it's changing up here. You've got curves, levels, exposure, all kinds of things for you to play around with. But you can do the same thing by going down here to this half black, half white circle. It says to create a new fill or adjustment layer. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to click on this. I prefer this method to this method only because I don't have to try to figure out what little picture and try to remember all these pictures. I've got the words right here. So it's just something I'm used to. This came about later. This was always there in older versions, so this is the way that I was used to doing it. So let's say I do hue and saturation. Now notice it has created this hue and saturation layer. So because it is a layer on top of my image, I can make it invisible, I can delete it, and it's not affecting or destroying my actual image below it. So I can grab my hue and saturation slider and I can change the colors here, give it a different hue. I can change the saturation, make it very saturated or desaturate. If you go all the way down to -100 with the saturation, then you basically get black and white as well. And if I click away from this and then go back to it, I can set everything back to 0 and it basically hasn't done anything. Also, I've got a few extra little things here that I didn't have when I did it through the image menu. I can do things like custom red boost or sepia. There's that sepia. I can also colorize. Basically, I can uncolorize. That's what that was. Old style kind of makes it just faded. So you've got some little presets here that you can do, or you can do things like, let's say I want to affect only the greens. Click on green and I can affect, now I'm only affecting the greens. Notice my purple flowers are pretty much staying the same. So there's just some other different things that you can do here that you can't do from the image menu. You also have some things here where you can, throw it in the trash can or undo or reset it. you can press to view previous states. You can disable it basically. So, or I'm sorry, you can tell it whether or not it's going to adjust effects all layers below it or just the one layer below it. So that can be very helpful later on if you want to get a bunch of adjustments going. That can come in very handy. So for instance, another thing you may have noticed is that this layer has a mask on it. So we talked about masks in a previous video. So it works the same way, like I talked about. Let's go ahead and add a filter or hue and saturation to this. And let's say we only want this pink to affect this flower and not to affect anything else. So basically, if we think of this as a paper plate mask when you were a kid, we've added this color to the white paper plate. If we want to see what's underneath it, this layer here, we have to cut out in black. So if I take my paintbrush and I've got black ink and I make sure that I am on my mask, you notice the difference. See, this is selected. Now my mask is selected. By the way, notice it will also sometimes change up here as well. So you've got your actual adjustment and here you've got your mask. So I'm on my mask and I click on black. And notice, whatever I do in black now is basically a hole that I've cut through that you can see below. This might work out a little bit better if we did something like a black and white saturation. So let's add the black and white adjustment. And black and white now is on that white paper plate covering everything. But if I take my black paintbrush and I cut out a section, let's say we cut out the flower, now I can see this hole where I can see the flower underneath. But as you can see, I did not do a very good painting job. I got little holes and it's hard to get very precise with a paintbrush. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to instead select that flower. So if I go back to my background layer so I can make a selection, grab either my quick select or my object select. Let's try the object select. And it did a pretty good job. It selected the flower. Now my flower is selected. Now if I go to my mask and I get my paintbrush and I've got my black ink, so I'm cutting out a hole. So now I'm cutting out a hole in this mask so that it can see the purple flower underneath. And I could do that ahead of time if I want to too. For instance, let's say I want to add the hue and saturation layer to this now. So I've got this. I'm going to add a hue and saturation layer and I've got my flower selected. So when I add that hue and saturation layer, notice it's got that white paper plate on what was selected, which was the flower. So now I'm colorizing only the white. The black is showing through to this layer. So I'm seeing this layer underneath it. So now I can color my flower and it's only going to colorize my flower or the white part or the paper plate. And the black is the hole that shows underneath. Now here's where we've got this little button here that says only have it affect the layer below it. So it's only affecting this layer. Well, this layer doesn't do me any good because this layer is already an adjustment layer. So that doesn't really help me. But it could in other situations. So just keep in mind that you do have that there. All right, so I've got two layer adjustments. They're completely non-destructive. I can go back. Let's say I want to go back to this black and white one and change it so that the black is a little bit brighter or a little bit different. So let's see, more like that. Or change it to a blue filter and get my black and white look like this. I can go back and make those changes at any time that I want to. I can give it a tint. So now I have this tint to this black and white. Maybe I like it a little bit more like that. So that's the great thing about these adjustment layers is you can go back at any time, click on that adjustment, change it, do whatever you want to it. You can get all kinds of really cool effects. So I hope that helps you. So you've got adjustment layers. You can do them either way, either by clicking here or by clicking here. So those are your adjustment layers. It doesn't really matter which way you do it. It's exactly the same. And these are non-destructive. Or you can go up to image adjustments. You have to be on an actual photo to do it. Sorry about that. Image adjustments, and you can do a destructive, whoopsie, little spastic mouse disorder. You can do a destructive method of adjusting here. All right, I hope that explains everything. Good luck with adjustments.